Our runway today is bisected by Winston Churchill Avenue and connects to the land side of Spain. Adjacent to the airport's terminal building, you can walk into Spain in less than 2 minutes. Located on the southern tip of the Iberian Peninsula, LXGB's skyline is dominated by the rock. Welcome to Gibraltar. Welcome to this FSElite review of the Skyline Simulations LXGB Gibraltar International Airport. I'm Tim.
And I'm Lee.
You may know us from our channel, Flight Brothers FT.
According to Wikipedia, in 2017 the airport handled 571,184 passengers and over 300,000 kilos of cargo on just under 5,000 total flights. Winston Churchill Avenue has to be closed every time a plane lands or departs, a feature simulated with this add-on.
The History Channel program, Most Extreme Airports, has ranked this airport 5th, just ahead of now-defunct Kai Tak Airport in Hong Kong, but just behind Princess Juliana International Airport. Gibraltar is exposed to strong crosswinds around the rock and across the bay, making landings in winter particularly uncomfortable. The approach charts contain a special wind effects page illustrating the complex wind patterns experienced here.
The installation of LXGB consists of a 6 gig download. That's right, 6 gigs, so prepare yourself and your system. An installation manual included is a short version. It's 8 pages long, but only 2 of those are actually the installation. Step 1 is copy the X-Plane custom scenery folder. Step 2 talks about the mesh and autogen overlays in your .ini file. Page 2 shows the ini file order as well. The download contains 2 RAR files. One is 1.4 gig, and that's the LXGB mesh, and the scenery is a 5.4 gig zipped file. I found difficulty installing the scenery. When you download it, initially it's a zipped file, then you unzip 2 files, which the short version of the installation manual didn't really spell out to me, so I ran into these issues. Tim, from what I understand, you didn't have this point or this same problem.
No, I didn't, although I think the first time I loaded it up, I had extracted the scenery to the custom scenery folder, which is very standard. I loaded up X-Plane and it wasn't there. So I went back and noticed what I had unzipped also contained 2 more zipped files. And I was like, oh, so then once I noticed that, I followed the directions, got the ini file sorted out, and it all worked fine. But that one step was just a little unclear that, hey, we've double zipped it for you. That was a little strange to me.
Yeah, I think correcting the folder within a folder, I think is ultimately what resolved my issue. So maybe for the next time it would be better, but that little bit of information I think in an installation manual would have made my process a little more seamless.
All right, so once you do get it installed, you have basically one runway to work with, 09/27. If you're coming in on 27, that's going to put the rock on your left-hand side. The runway textures here look good both day and night, and you have appropriate staining and some irregular concrete textures that add to the realism. You've got high contrast paint markings displaying a nice shine quality thanks to PBR texturing. Taxiways are minimal because they have so little land to work with. LXGB only has short connecting taxiways into the civilian and military ramps.
Since the runway is bisected by Churchill Avenue, there are barricades shown to keep road traffic separate from the air traffic. We found that these encroached upon the runway safety area. The barricades ran right up until the edge of the runway. I think that's a little unrealistic. Perhaps when that data was gathered, the runway would have been closed. The real barricade actually turns to a painted safety marker at that edge area. So we did find, based on some Google images, that to be a little inaccurate. Also, the 2,000-foot remaining sign is in the middle of one of your main taxiways, turning into the ramp area.
You do have a nicely rendered terminal building, and if you mess with the camera angles to get yourself inside, you will find people and seating that are modeled accurately to the real terminal. One of the quirks of X-Plane, though, is you cannot really look outside or your aircraft become invisible, and I believe this is just a transparency issue with the way X-Plane renders glass and other things. But assuming you're staying outside, the terminal looks fantastic and accurate.
Moving from the immediate airport area to the surrounding area, you have an Ortho Tile that is included with this download. If you already have Ortho scenery, there are instructions in the attached document that will tell you how to prioritize that and use your tile versus theirs. There's a ship out near the dock, and the Ortho imagery has the satellite scan ship, and then they have an animated boat over top of it. So when you're flying over there, you'll notice that. And we did find some odd blends between custom textures of the Ortho and the overlays.
Right, and I think one of the main things that was a real challenge, and to my mind one of the reasons to even get the scenery, is X-Plane could not manage to get that rock face. It's just not something X-Plane was set up to do. So I believe that is the rock itself, one giant custom texture, and that required them to have this enormous custom texture and blend it to Ortho and blend that to the overlays, and so that they had quite a task there. But one of the best things about it, I think, is the way that all comes together at night. The night lighting in the scenery, to my eyes, looks fantastic. The air side is very good looking. The main parking areas are illuminated appropriately. The rock itself, facing the airport, is illuminated, and it is quite a sight at night. The main custom buildings are also illuminated in the area, like the hotels and other surrounding things right around the airport. On the land side of the rock, we've got some of the rock illuminated. There's a artillery firing battery. It is illuminated. Interestingly enough, with all of these enormously lit areas, like the rock itself, you don't see any light source. So there's no giant spots down there that are obvious to find. So things are lit correctly, but that might strike you as a little odd. Most of the parking areas and the garages are illuminated. The custom buildings are also illuminated, and the Ortho at the base of the rock at the southwest side towards the inlet has some soft illuminations. You will notice the textures on the rocks here are pretty good, and I think it stands out more at night, but they're not 100% perfect, so they don't necessarily hold up to great scrutiny if you zoom in tremendously. Lee, I understand you noticed some lighting effects I didn't even notice here.
Yeah, the runway edge lighting and the centerline lights actually changed color as you approached the departure or the overrun areas. So the centerline light, for example, turned red and white, and then your last, I didn't get the remaining, but I think it was about 2,000 feet from the end, you would have the red and white alternating centerline lights, and then the last 1,000 feet were red. I found that very realistic and true to a airport environment.
That's because I've never had the displeasure of having to unscrew any of those to replace them, sir. I don't notice these things.
Right. I think there's about 6 bolts holding them in.
What a task.
Some additional features worth noting. There's a cemetery modeled on the southeast side of the airport. This is next to the military ramp. Of course, you have the Churchill Avenue crossing with animated traffic. There are cable cars on the rock, which are also animated and ascend and descend accordingly. There's a lighthouse at the promontory. And tanker and freighters replace the X-plane default destroyers. And a tanker sails past the end of runway 09 we've seen. You also have the radome on top of the rock, an artillery battery that faces Spain, and detailed high-rise buildings. This includes a Holiday Inn Express, I believe it is, near the parking garage. And you have high detail near the runway, gas stations, and memorials as well.
All right, so probably the most striking special feature that had to be included here was the animated traffic crossing system for Winston Churchill Avenue. This feature is controlled using the taxi lights on your aircraft, or at least that's what the documentation says. We've had a mix of success with this, really. The taxi light cue worked for me perfectly on my Malibu Meridian by Coronado. It did not work using the default X-plane Cirrus, and I suspected that might be because the Cirrus only has landing lights, and perhaps the scenery did not recognize those. I also used the freeware Dornier 328, and it did work correctly with that.
And that 328, if you want to pick that up, we have a video on this channel with that as well. Tim, I did find I was flying a free downloaded X-Plane 9 version of a Piaggio, and the landing light did function with the traffic on that.
Perfect. And I did have one thing that didn't make any sense. It was a glitch, and I don't know if it was my XP or the scenery, but one time I had the traffic stop in the street, and I'll admit to landing through a truck. It might show up in our B-roll here, but I think that was maybe a one-off glitch. It's not something I experienced more than that one time.
On to performance, I did experience a moderate lag when circling the aircraft when I spawned, especially next to the rock. I think that texturing really hits my system a little harder. When I hit the C button and kind of moved out and around, I didn't notice the lag as much. When I'm flying at night with clear skies, performance was fine. Fog and low ceilings, though, when I flew that with real weather, I did see a little bit of stutter and chop in the performance of it.
Right, and I had a comparable experience with my own system. Just watching off the Avatab, I was occasionally down to 38 frames. And we are using the new Vulcan release of X-Plane, and I've been typically running 50 to 60 frames with that. And I'm going to second Lee's opinion that it's probably the rock texture itself, along with the high concentration of custom scenery at the airport location. The farther I got from the airport, the less issues I seemed to have. Quite honestly, I didn't see issues really anywhere else. It was only at the runway when I was finding issues while filming.
So if you want to add Gibraltar to your X-Plane library, what is it going to cost? We found some differing prices here on the internet. €23.90 on Skyline Simulations website. Sim Market had it for €20.40 or 24 US dollars. So you might want to look around just to see. Kind of odd that we saw this price deviation from a new product, but if you're interested in it and may do some shopping around, save you a couple dollars.
All right, so what's the overall impression here? Gibraltar is imposing. The rock is impressive, particularly from far out on approach. Those enormous lights, it is just stunning to see. At close range, you might find some small faults and quirks in the scenery, but nothing large, nothing that I would consider a deal breaker. The night lighting in particular makes those approaches really impressive, and the short runway and the winds in this area also make it an extra challenge.
So Tim, would you suggest that the scenery be purchased?
Well, I think you can probably tell from just how I sound with this. I love the rock, and I think they did a great job here. I think for the price point, this is the sort of scenery pack I would pick up. How about you, Lee?
I think if I flew there more frequently, I would. It's worth considering. I'm interested in checking out some of their other products based on the execution of this product. I haven't flown to Gibraltar prior to doing this, but I think their execution of it was very well done.
All right, well, we hope you've enjoyed this look at Skyline Simulations Gibraltar. Like and subscribe for similar content here at FSElite on YouTube. Be sure to add FSElite.net to your internet browser favorites to stay up on all the latest flight simulation news.
For FSElite, we are the Flight Brothers FT, reminding you to plan the flight
And fly the plan.